for this week, we've got Bryan with us. Hey, Bryan, how are you?
Hello, doing all right. Glad to be here. Heard a lot of great things about Liam and Charlie, and had Amanda Berlin, of course, my co-host on BrakeSec, on just in the past few months, and she's like, "You should really talk to these folks." And I was like, "Okay, cool, yeah, let's reach out and have a chat."
Awesome, awesome. Let's have fun. Do you want to start maybe with a quick intro about yourself?
Sure, yeah. I have a little experience with this just recently. So, about 20 years in the information security community. Started work in the, I'm a veteran, so I started doing patch management and vulnerability management back before it was just, patch all the things. So, done some work with Xerox in financial, spaces. Moved on to CrowdStrike. I was there before they IPO'd, so I helped build out their security program. Moved to consulting with Leviathan Security up there. Shout out to Leviathan Security in Seattle. And most recently, up until about a month ago, I worked at Amazon on the bug bounty program and product security for some IoT platforms. So really excited to be here and to talk about whatever anybody wants to talk about. I've pretty much, I think, done everything in information security except for, maybe some reverse engineering. I wouldn't be so hot on that. But yeah, any questions, any comments, I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome, awesome. When were you at CrowdStrike? What year was that?
2014 to 2018. I
Okay,
was
okay.
number three security person behind Mike Convertino and the GRC folks. So got to help build some of that out, and it was very exciting. Very at the time, CrowdStrike was the problem because everybody didn't believe in endpoint security. They just felt as though it was interesting to see the transformation of that industry into what it is now.
For sure, for sure. That's cool. We must have worked at the same time. I was working for Mike.
Okay.
So around those same years, I think I was like around employee 100 kind of thing. So
All
we
right.
must have crossed path briefly there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, fascinating point in history for sure. Awesome, awesome. I mean, yeah, like it sounds like there's a bunch of things we could talk about. I think certainly like one thing you kind of mentioned that I don't think we have talked about a whole lot in the past here has been bug bounty programs.
Sure.
Um, I don't know if do you want to tell us a little bit about what you did there and your thoughts on that or anything like that?
Sure, yeah. So bug bounty is interesting, and I'm going to put out a disclaimer here that my opinions of bug bounty are not necessarily the opinions of a current or previous employer. I have my own opinions about them after working for them for 3 years, and so bug bounty is an interesting paradigm. It is very much what I would consider the last line of what you can control, right? After bug bounty is you've got researchers who are giving you in good faith those items, those findings that they have. A lot of times they miss some context, but the it's the last line of defense before a researcher goes to the media and says, "Hey, here's a vulnerability I found. I'm gonna, give it to you, and you can splash it all over the news and do whatever you want with it." They definitely have their place, and I really like working with the security researcher community because they'll often find things that a code scanning tool or even a red team or a third party pen test team or security assessment team will not find because they don't come from that context. A lot of times it's they'll, oh, I did this and I managed to do that, and I look at some of those findings and I'm like, how did you even get to, how could you figure that thing out? So a lot of it is really interesting because they come from all walks of life. It could be some student who's learning something in computer science class or something. They bring a different point of view to the testing that you don't get from people who do this professionally. When you work on a red team or something, you have a playbook. Oh, I'm going to do this thing because I'm going to do this thing because I'm going to do this thing. Sometimes the security researcher will ignore this part and go completely to plan, part B or part C, and it's like, oh, okay. Well, if I hadn't done A, I get to B and C, but I can do C without necessarily doing A and B, or it's just interesting to see that kind of point of view.
Yeah, have you found like I feel like having been a while, there's a lot of hot takes around that, around the parameters for the bug bounty programs, particularly when it comes to like disclosure. It happens. Well, maybe it happens a little bit less than it did in the past, but where somebody ends up kind of disclosing early or being at odds with the vendor. Have you seen, like, I'm curious, what's your take, and if you've seen patterns and anti-patterns about like doing those types of programs?
I think the the researchers sometimes will it really depends on what their motivation is. Usually it's money. Sometimes it's um, fame or the 10-point font you used to get on Microsoft, CVEs or what have you. I really think it depends on what their motivation is for those for why they do it. A lot of times, and you see this now, you got some researchers that's all they do. That's all they do is the bug bounty stuff. With regard to patterns, I think you have people that will focus on certain aspects of an organization, or I think they do it for different ways of motivating those things. Did that answer your question, or is there some, maybe I'm missing some context here?
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly thinking around, you know, there's there's always been a push and pull in the security industry
Sure.
with regards to vulnerabilities.
Right.
There are some folks, I think, on both extremes, right? Like it's a spectrum, right? Meaning there's some people that say, pardon my French, like F the vendors, just report all the things publicly all the time, like
Right. Right.
anarchy. Then you've got the other end, which is, no, if you report anything at all, you should be legally liable, and blah 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 blah.
Mm,
Like you have to report publicly. And then I feel like then there's a big middle ground, which is where the bug bounty programs have tried to kind of add some formality of like, okay, we're both going to agree that this is how we're going to do this.
right.
Um, and I don't know, maybe it's just like what I've been exposed to in the past, but like from my perspective, it feels like those programs have helped a lot because you
Oh,
don't
sure.
hear as much about like the two kind of extremes. But
Right.
is there some subtlety about how you structure those?
There definitely is some subtlety. There's some organizations, and I've seen various ways of doing it. Some of them are wide open. It depends on how much you're wanting to expose your outside, your surface, right? And there's some organizations that are, they only want these certain parts of their organization. When I worked at CrowdStrike, we actually, I want to say even back in 2017, 2018, we were looking at a bug bounty program because we would get emails to our security ads saying, hey, I found a vulnerability, pay me or else. That's all we got. We didn't actually find out what the vulnerability was. And we would run IR because it was like, we didn't know what they were talking about, but we didn't want to necessarily engage them because we didn't want to show our hand or what have you. It's become a very much a more mature process now. And um, there are researchers out there. It's like, yeah, burn it down, right? And there are actually legitimate researchers that want, well, legitimate. They're all researchers legitimately, but there's other ones that want to work with the system, and they want to improve things and they want to make things better. And that's they get CVEs and they get invited to events where they can open up opportunities to those things. So I think it does come in all spectrum. I think now a lot of researchers are, especially with the rise of the CNAs, where they're distributing that out from MITRE. A lot of researchers are like, yeah, I found this issue. I'd like the company to issue a CVE. So you get organizations that are starting to get savvy with that. It's like, okay, the researchers are going to come to us, here's a vulnerability. They want some accountability. So, hey, they ask for a CVE, or they want to know that there's going to be some kind of public release of the issue. And a lot of researchers are now asking, hey, I found this vulnerability. I'm going to be talking at this conference, and I'd like to be able to, disclose this. So, it kind of motivates the organizations to want to fix those because customer, researcher wants to talk about this at a conference, or they're gonna blog about it or something. So there's more avenues now for researchers to share what they know, either through a blog post, a Medium post, or they'll tweet about it or something like that.
Interesting. Jeff, I feel like you had a hot take earlier.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, just from a mechanics perspective, generally, if a company is a CNA, then it is extremely difficult to get a CVE assigned by anyone but that company. So
Right,
CNA, like
right,
they are the ones who can assign CVEs directly to their own products, and it is
exactly.
I'm going to go straight to goddamn miracle to get a CVE assigned if the company doesn't want to be assigned. And sometimes there are shenanigans there with
Oh yeah.
improperly marking the CVE, or they're the ones that fill out the CVs as score. So if there's any plausible way they can fudge for the final resulting CVSS score to be lower, they have sometimes the incentives to do so. Um,
Yep.
So
Yep.
hypothetically, let's say somebody was listening here and wasn't really familiar with the whole concept of CNA and CNE, CVE, and all of that. Hypothetically, can you explain a little bit what that is for my friend?
yeah, for your friend, Bryan knows this much better than I do. This is not my area as much, but the actual acronym is CVE Numbering Authority. So it
Right.
is a nested acronym, as we all like. So an organization that can issue their own CVEs for their own products normally, as opposed to going to one of the generic CNAs that can do for any other company that doesn't have a their own that isn't a CNA. So like when Linux became a CNA, they effectively assigned CVEs for every bug within the Linux kernel, regardless of its security related or not, which is why we're like burning. They are the number one CVE issuer as of the year after they started. Once they had a full year of it, they are the new number one, which is slowly breaking what it means to be a CVE. It is a nearly broken system that is slightly better than not having a reliable indicator to talk about a vulnerability. It is a horrible system. It
That's
is just
interesting.
better than a complete lack of it.
Right.
Right.
Is the CNA supposed to be, is the logic behind it supposed to be, look, this organization is large and mature enough that they should be able to kind of take care of their own stuff? Or is it, hey, you guys have so many, we don't want to burden everybody else, you do it? Or it's kind of like a mix?
I assume Bryan maybe knows this better than I. I assume it's yeah. You're big enough that we the rest of the people involved in CVSS scoring and CVEs in general can trust you to do it, and it means less work for us, and it means that we piss off big companies less often by letting them handle the CVE issuance
Right.
within their own company. So some
Right.
combination of those, but
Yeah, I mean, it's like Microsoft's bulletins they send out every month for Patch Tuesday, giving you an itemized list of things. A lot of times they will reference, "Hey, this was found by this person. This is a CVE." You see that with the Android security bulletins as well from Google. When they come out, it's like, "Here's a CVE." They've issued their CVEs. They actually, I would say, hold themselves to a standard where they're submitting CVEs themselves and pushing out updates. And giving due respect. They're crediting the people that have found these things. Other organizations do similar. Some do better than others. And yeah, that's just part of the organization. I think MITRE had a Herculean task way back in the day when there were less vulnerabilities. I would say there weren't less vulnerabilities. It was just they reported on less things because there were less things to deal with. I think it's exploded in the past few years because they wanted to cast a wider net with regards to vulnerabilities. Moving into more open source things, but you can see the graphs every year. It's like I remember when CVEs were a 4-digit number. Now we're up to 5 and even 6 digits, depending on the types, and they actually have reserved numbers for vendors. So if you're a go ahead, Jeff. What's up?
oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interject so much as
No.
I can't help if CVE and Microsoft has brought up that Microsoft defines CVEs differently than the rest of the world. The
Right.
rest of the world, CVE is defined for the vulnerability, regardless of the patch that resolves that flaw. Microsoft chooses to name the CVE after the patch that is supposed to get rid of the vulnerability. And they have had, of course, failed patches that don't actually get rid of the vulnerability, which means they issue a new CVE for the last vulnerability, but better this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we saw that this
Another
morning, as a
problem with
matter of fact.
CNAs. Just
Yeah,
saying.
Microsoft no stranger to that. We actually saw one I saw this morning, React. Because of React to Shell, they actually had to issue a new patch because the initial patch didn't actually fix everything. And so there's a new CVE out for a denial of service condition because the original patch that they had didn't fix the issue. So patch for the patch, exactly, William, in our chat there. I think we see a lot of those where they're shotgunning the patches out because they have to fix it immediately in that case, and it doesn't always fix the patch. I think we've seen a couple of these in the past where it's like, yeah, they fix one thing, but they didn't actually fix all of it. So yeah, and that's vulnerability management for you. You know, you want to fix those things because you want to stop the bleeding, and they did stop 80% of the bleeding. If denial of service is a problem for you, then yeah, you're gonna want to patch Friday again on your React servers to fix that issue. So yeah, it's an interesting quandary with vulnerability management as a whole because going back to bug bounty, some of those issues are legitimate issues that you wouldn't have found, like I said, with tooling or with many eyes on this. So having people who aren't beholden necessarily to a company or have any kind of, I don't say bias, but have a maybe they're doing this on their off time. They come home after working a 9 to 5 and they just want to poke around on something for a few hours and they find something. Here's $2,000 or here's $5,000. But a lot of them just think outside the box. And I love the fact that we have the ability to enable these folks to report these things when they come out.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I'm curious about, like, if you have a specific thought on, we kind of touched a little bit on the idea that, like, the graph is going up and it's accelerating, right?
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
I think. Am I actually wrong
You're
on this?
absolutely right,
Okay.
but it doesn't mean what it used to mean.
Right.
Because we issue CVEs by any CNA for any reason that any of the CNAs choose to issue CVEs, it no longer means vulnerabilities that deserve human attention by any means. So we're measuring different things over time, which means it's no longer a useful metric.
Right. But
Yeah.
if I was to, if I kind of connect those dots, right? Like, I would expect, again, correct me, that a CNA like that, let's say Microsoft, would have an incentive to not generate a lot of CVEs. And so when they become their own CNA, they would kind of have incentive to kind of keep that down. So in fact, it would kind of be the opposite, or am I missing a bit?
Bryan?
I think that they would have a narrowly defined parameters that may not necessarily jive with what everyone else agrees to.
I
So,
am oh, sorry. I'll let you go. Oh, sorry.
I,
I am
yeah,
convinced MSRC is a bot that holds on new reports for 2 weeks and then replies with, upon further examination, what you've described as a bug is in fact a feature of the protocol working as designed. And then they auto reply and close the submission.
right. So yes, in the same vein of my crisis is not necessarily your crisis. You're going to have Microsoft. You're going to have all of these organizations that have bug bounties, and they're going to have. And I think somebody mentioned that having a bug bounty program just by itself is a huge undertaking. There's going to be an element of, do we want to report this publicly or do we not want to report this publicly? We need to have guidelines for that. Same as what is an incident versus what is not an incident. Is this a bug? Is this a feature? Is this a thing that we want publicly known, or is this something we already knew about and we're going to fix? A lot of times I see on like Reddit's bug bounty Reddit, which I follow quite religiously. Hey, they said this was already found. Could very well have been an issue that was found. They don't want to necessarily report on it because it was already in the pipeline to be fixed. You have to have criteria for when you are going to report something and follow that. And maybe that's the transparency there, where organizations need, like, we will report this as a legitimate issue and issue a CVE based on these criteria. And if they're not held to that, people should hold them to that. But sometimes some organizations don't publish what they consider, from a CVE point of view, what should be a CVE when they're issuing those.
I find it fascinating to try to connect the dots forward. And like, there's one interpretation of this, which is there's more and more software. And that means that just the surface is getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Sure.
And which means there's two forces, contradicting each other, right? One is there's more software, therefore more vulnerabilities. Now, one would hope there's new languages that reduce certain types of vulnerabilities. So, like those kind of like balance each other. But it feels like if we connect the dots of it keeps going up and to the right. Where does that bring us? Like, does that end up rendering the concept of CVE or the program, I won't say useless, but the day where we get like, hey, there's 1,000 CVEs for my environment every day, what changes in IT and in delivering SaaS and in delivering software? Like, I feel like there's a profound issue that we're kind of just, it's a boiling frog, right? Any thoughts on that?
Right. So a lot of issues, at least in my experience, when there are vulnerabilities, sometimes the original company or the original organization are not the organization that's going to fix them, especially if you leverage a lot of open source in this case. So you run into a bit of a conflict. It's like, we could issue a CVE for this, but this isn't our code. Like curl, if there's a vulnerability where a researcher finds something in a product and it's actually boils down to a problem with curl. Curl has been very vocal in the fact that, we're going to only process these things in a proper manner. You really have to walk a fine line when you're running a bug bounty. Is like, is this our code? Or is this an upstream issue? Or is this a downstream issue? Should we be the one issuing the CVE for this? Or should, if it's a curl issue, is it the Linux team, the Linux CNA that should be doing this and should be communicating with these things? In many ways, it becomes a supply chain issue, because it's like, do you want to let people know that you actually use this library publicly, or is your reporting of this vulnerability going to cause the downstream problems? Like, if we were to report on a wget or a curl issue or an ffmpeg issue, and downstream's like, well, we didn't know about it, there takes time and effort to disclose to them, and they're going to tell us, well, it's not really an issue, we're not going to fix it. Or, oh yeah, we've already fixed this issue and we already knew about it, they just, you haven't upgraded your libraries to the latest version. So it really, I don't want to say becomes a political issue in many cases, but it's definitely one that's sometimes difficult to navigate.
Yeah, that is brutal. That is brutal when you start to consider the downstream effect of curl declaring that they have a CVE.
Right. Plus, the downstream issues. I'm sorry. You have an ffmpeg issue, for instance. I'm not saying there is one, but you go downstream and you find out everybody and their brother uses ffmpeg. Anything with a screen, anything that handles audio or video processing uses ffmpeg. And it affects not just your company, but 15 other Fortune 5 companies, that kind of thing. So you really have to be surgical almost about how you're going to handle those things as if you're a CNA in that case, because you have to organize the impact. It's a blast radius kind of thing where you have to understand, well, okay, yeah, we found this here, but it really affects Microsoft, it affects Google, it affects everybody under the sun because they're using this library. And going back to React or whatever, the propping up the internet with this little shim thing, XKCD comic. you could topple things, right? And so I think we saw that just recently, not just with React, but with other ones as well. So you really have to think through when you're a CNA or with a bug bounty program what the ramifications of allowing a researcher to go and talk at a conference about these things are. It's not just your organization that's dealing with things like open source or with other libraries.
Yeah, I will add that sometimes legitimately the same vulnerability should have multiple CVEs, one for the upstream,
Mm.
and they should be aware from the get-go and should have the official patch. But like if libcurl is used inside of VMware vCenter, then VMware is going to issue their own CVE for how it affects their products, so you can track what are the vulnerable and patched versions within the VMware stack. And
Right.
that is the way it should be in that case. Um, yeah, dependencies and CVEs are hard.
Understatement. Yes, yes. Yeah. And there's double dipping as well. Not to go back to bug bounty, but you will have that double dipping if you report from, a researcher will report a libcurl issue in this one system, but then they'll go somewhere else if if it's an upstream or a downstream, and you can double dip on bug bounties, which is not necessarily always discussed. But yeah, if you know you're going to get 2,000 over here and another 3,000 over here, you could easily clean up if you know that different organizations are using the same kind of libraries across that. So it's definitely a feeding frenzy sometimes when you find a really juicy bug.
Man, oh man, that is yeah, it's even more messy than I thought coming in. Do you have thoughts on how to make this better in the future? Like or kind of like if you had a wish of how it could be reorganized, you have a like, hey, I think if we did it this way, things would get better.
I'd love to hear Jeff's thoughts on this as well, but I think communication, it always helps to communicate. If it's a CNA thing or if it's a bug bounty thing, there needs to, I don't want to say an ISAC kind of thing, but if you have a bug bounty, things like, HackerOne and BugCrowd and those, they handle a lot of different bug bounty programs. So it I would love to see more communication between maybe bug bounty programs or with organizations that handle bug bounties, where it'd be like, hey, you can opt into this. Obviously, this would be an opt-in thing, but it'd be like communicating, hey, this issue was found. Maybe you need to communicate that with other organizations to maybe not head off double dipping or triple dipping the bounties, but it's like, we have this open source issue that was found by this organization. You also have this in your bug bounty policy where it's like, this is an issue. So having better communication, I think, across CNAs or across organizations to, I don't want to say reduce the amount that bug bounty researchers are going to get, but better communication of vulnerabilities to reduce that impact, I think would be always helpful in my opinion.
Briefly, bug bounty payouts are such a tiny fraction of a millionth of a percent anyway that I don't think it actually affects companies if the bug bounty budgets had to increase, because the dependencies that are also part of your bug bounty are things you have to pay out for sometimes. I will also briefly add that as a security researcher, you should be very careful before reporting through a bug bounty program such as HackerOne, et cetera, not to pick on them, because normally you're also signing up for, you will never speak of this bug ever again outside of this program unless the company lets you, period, which is a very important EULA to read before you sign.
That is true.
Fascinating, fascinating. Cool. I mean, that was super interesting. Thank you for coming in. I did not know I was going to learn about more stuff like that about bug bounty and the CNA, or my friend, I should say, learned a lot about the CNA. Awesome. Is there any way, if folks want to get in touch with you, Bryan, is there any better way to get in touch with you?
Sure, you can find me. I'm actually probably on LinkedIn now. You can just search for my name, Bryan Brake. I also have a regular YouTube stream myself that I do, news of the week. I do coding exercises and interviews as well. You can go look up BrakeSec Education on YouTube. And I'm on Twitch and YouTube over there. I simulcast over there. Would love to have people come and join and ask questions and AMA. It's always AMA for me. So I just thanks to Liam and Charlie for having me on today. I appreciate it.